A while back my ceiling fan went out, and as a quick fix I did this to get some light in the room. Now I could easily just replace the fan and be on my way, but I really want to add 2 fans in this room to take advantage of the ceiling space. And to do that, there's a lot of work involved between adding support in the ceiling, running new wires, installing the fan. I just really don't have the time to dedicate to that project right now. So as a temporary fix to my now temporary fix, today I'm going to show you guys how I made this really cool pendant light. And the best part, it's really not that hard to make. Let me show you how I made it. First thing you're going to need to do is to select the lumber that you want to use. I'm going to use select pine. And to mount this, I'm going to use some of the pieces I took from the fan that went bad. Chances are you won't have these pieces laying around, but these are the lights I'm going to use for this project, and you can use these lights along with the cables that comes with it to hang it from the ceiling. Next, I'll need to extend the conductors to meet the junction box. And finally, I used threaded pipe to attach the fan pieces to the fixture. I used the light fixture to set the distance of the fence away from the blade. And although you can measure, I find this to be a quicker way to cut the base. When it comes to the sides, I mitered the ends just to give a cleaner look. But if this one seemed to be a bit too difficult for you, you can always use a butt joint. Now I'm going to take that base that I recently cut on the table saw, line that up with this piece of wood, clamp them together, and then mark the other end. So the smaller wood you see in the frame is the same length of 2 of these lights put together. And from that line I can then mark the 45 angle. And this way everything should be on point. And after cutting that angle, I repeated it once more, and now we can start the glue up. And if done correctly, everything should line up. Now I use the nail gun because it speeds up the process, but you can totally clamp these pieces together and not even have a nail hole in it, period. And after taking care of the first side, it's time to attach the other side. And to close this up, you'll need to cut a few miter pieces to cap off the ends. And speaking from experience, it doesn't matter how many tools you own, there's always something you don't have. Chances are you'll need to pick up a set of these as well to work on these lights. So these lights are designed to be plugged in an outlet, which is then controlled by a light switch. But in this case, we have to rewire it to fit this application. And after taking the 2 screws out, the lid on the top should slide right out. So now I have complete access to the wires inside, and now I need to use a power cord, which you can get for these lights, plug those in because I need to check which leg is what. There's no easy way for me to look at this and tell right away, so I had to test it this way. I used the voltmeter to decide which one was the neutral and which one was the hot leg. I was also prepared to extend the earth ground, but didn't seem to be one inside. Now ideally you want to use some kind of connector like this after you cut the wires to then splice it back. Now I did not like this about the lights, but you'll find that these wires are really short and it made it really difficult to use the connectors I just showed. And either way you cut it, you're gonna have to splice the wires back. And luckily I had these terminals here that went directly in line, preventing me from having 2 splice points to extend the wires. Now I need to drill out a hole for the cover plate, and this hole should be really close to the end, maybe 2 or 3 inches away from the end of inner side of the plate. Now because I don't have a grommet this small, I'm going to use a plastic wall anchor. Anytime you drill through any kind of metal, you definitely want to use some kind of protection to protect the copper from rubbing or touching it. And to make sure this doesn't come out easy, I'm going to dab some hot glue around it. At this point it should be safe enough to pass the power wire through the makeshift plastic grommet. And to make sure you get the maximum length out of your wire, be sure to place that hole closest to the splice point. Now this part definitely got a little challenging to get the cover back on due to the fact that the wire inside was already just too short. When I do this again, I'll have a different approach so that I don't have to fight with the length of the wire. And after working it back inside, I can now close this up. Now one thing I had to think about was how to access these lights once they go bad, because when I snap these up inside the frame, it's going to be almost impossible to pull them back out. So the idea I came up with was to attach these pieces from the top, and the light will be mounted to them. So whenever I loosen up the screws, the light fixture in theory will then fall out. I need to mark and drill a hole for the power wire to come out. This is also the location where the fan pole would also be mounted. To attach the small pieces of wood on the inside, I'm going to pre-drill the holes first. And while I have the drill in hand, it's a good time to go ahead and drill the hole for the pipe flange. I'll also need to pre-drill the pieces of wood on the inside, this way they don't split when I add the screws. Now to make life a lot easier, I'm going to pin those in there by using a piece of wood and a clamp, then attach the screws. I lined up the light fixture and the wood frame beside each other, then I eyeballed the location for the clips. These fixtures should be lined up inside the frame. When the time comes, these should just snap in place. So these wasn't my first option, and I ended up adding these because the cap that covers the flange actually overhanged a little too much, and I needed a way to make that blend in a little better so it didn't look awkward. So I'm still not sold on if I actually like these pieces, or are they an addition, or do they take away from the design? I would definitely like to know what you think about that. And after adding the pieces in the middle, I decided to extend that towards the ends because I just thought that it looked a little out of place. After the glue dried, I filled in the holes with wood filler and sanded it down. Since this is going inside my bedroom and I have a few pieces in there that already have similar finish, I just thought it made sense to let this light blend in as well. And after the Danish oil cured, I added 2 coats of wipe-on poly. And at this point, everything is pretty much ready to go. It's time to do the satisfying part and put it all together and just snap these pieces inside of the clips. And as I explained before, had I not added those spacers inside, there would be no getting these out. So you just simply take the screws loose and these should fall out. For me to make the light fixture and the pole work together, I needed to add this piece, which I also added a hole in it. So if you happen to missed it earlier in the video and you actually want to tackle this project, but you don't have access to the fan pieces that I'm using here, what you can do is just utilize the cables that came with the lights, and those should work just fine. Now when it comes to the power cord, you can just use a clear lamp cord and that should work fine as well. I'm pretty happy that I kept these pieces when the fan crapped out on me because this actually gives a really nice finished look on it. And all there is to do is to cut the wires down and strip them, then mount this thing to the ceiling. So having the fan hook mount already on the ceiling was a huge help as it is, because I didn't have to hold the lamp up as I connect the wires or mount the cables on the ceiling, so that kind of worked out. And after splicing all the wires together, I can just close this up by just easily putting up these covers, and that instantly gave it a clean look. And it is mounted on the ceiling, and that's pretty good. So now I need to make sure that this thing look level when you're looking at it from the ground. So I'm going to use some large washers, and once I get it all balanced out, at that point I can use double-sided tape to hold those pieces in place. Now these lights turn out to be really cool and super bright. It's kind of hard for me to show you in this environment because it's so lit at the time of recording. So I'm going to show you some footage in the garage where it's completely dark, and then you can see how bright they are. So a little specs on these lights: they're 2 feet long and they're 20 watts. They are LEDs and they're designed to last up to 30,000 hours. And the color temperature on these is 5000 K cool white. And this means that you get almost daylight inside. And after settling on these lights, it's really good to get a hands-on experience and seeing them in person. So I'm really looking forward to upgrading the lights in my shop just so I can eliminate all the dark spots. Well, that is it for this one, guys. I'm Glenn with DIY Creators, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the next one.